Hello, welcome to Off Track, the motorcycle racing podcast. I'm your host, Dave Neal. Welcome to Laceby Manor. Thank you so much to Roger Burnett for vacating his office for us. But I'm delighted to say 5 times British champion, 5 times Northwest 200 winner, 7-time TT winner, the legend that is Mick Grant. Mick, welcome to Off Track.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We've done this once already, haven't we?
Yeah.
Guess who forgot to press record on the new microphones? I'm getting good at this. It's becoming a running joke on the podcast now that we do forget to turn the microphones on now and again because we keep changing the technology and upgrading the technology to make the audio better, and then I forget. So now we know it's recording. Thank you for your patience, Mick. We only got 30 seconds in.
Yeah, we did start at 7 o'clock this morning.
It's now 1:45, so we're getting there eventually. As we said, we're at Laceby Manor, a fantastic place. We've had lunch together with Roger and how much we enjoyed that. The food's fantastic here.
It's just nice to get in this area a good restaurant because you can get pub grub. I mean, I've been in Lincolnshire from West Yorkshire. I've been over here now 18 years. And the only thing I dislike about the place is you can't get good food. But Roger is providing it. And it's only just new and it's a new facility. But I'm going to be coming on a regular basis, I'll tell you.
He'll be overjoyed to hear that. There'll be some stories then to be caught
Absolutely,
up. Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in motorcycle racing as the son of a West Yorkshire miner?
I got a pal called Chris Bradley. We grew up together in the same village in Middlestown. And his father used to be a member of the Wakefield and District Motor Club. And he used to take us out on a Sunday to watch trials and motocross and whatever else. And this particular weekend we went to Scarborough to Oliver's Mount, which is obviously, it's had a very special place for me because that's where I got my enthusiasm to go racing. And the funny thing is that when I was doing an art college course, to teach a training course, and my parents, because they were working class, they wanted me to have something better. And they pushed me into doing this. And I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I was just going through a process and it was a horrible, dark time. And then I saw some racing at Scarborough and suddenly there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank God. And I've chased that light all my career. And I just feel sorry for kids now that don't know what they want to do because I went through that. And if I hadn't have had motorcycle racing, I don't know where I'd have finished up at.
You started quite late as well, didn't you? When you look at the modern way of doing it, you were a fairly late starter.
I was, but I've always had this theory that I think now I would argue that maybe kids have been started too early because you have your common sense bit round about 25 to about 32, and really I think you should be getting kids to be at the best around about that time. And I started late. I mean, I was at my very best at 32 years old. So, yeah.
How did the fascination with the TT come about? Because you started early on the Norton and then moved on to the TT side of things with Kawasaki and Slippery Sam in the early days as well. Tell me about the fascination with the TT, because that's where it kind of all kicked off for you, wasn't it?
Listen, if you enjoy riding and racing motorbikes, you will love riding around the Isle of Man. I remember when Agostini suddenly blacked it because of safety reasons. I remember the year before, I was going up Craig Willis Hill, not as quick as he was by any stretch, and he passed me on the MV Augusta in a practice. And he was on the back wheel all the way up there. And he did that for one reason. He was enjoying it. If you enjoy riding motorbikes, you've got to ride the Isle of Man. And I can see from a safety point of view why people wouldn't do it. But at that age, safety is not that important. It's more important to fulfill what you want to do. And I've enjoyed the mixture of racing on roads and circuits. I mean, let's be honest, every time I went to the Isle of Man, I've always been conscious of being safe. And I say to myself when I'm going over there, no, you be careful, don't you? You'll be coming back in a box. You get to the average, ask the average guy on a Monday morning to go to work and say to himself, now, look, you be careful, don't you? You'll be coming back in a box. We aren't quite right.
The special road racers are a special breed.
But thank God we aren't. Yeah.
Well, no, that's right, because that's what gives us the TT, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's riders like yourselves over the years, and to the modern day riders that go over, they are something different. And it is, for me, it's almost gladiatorial.
Yeah.
In the feeling that you get for the riders that do the TT. And you all did it and do it because you want to, not because you have to.
That's right. And it's, whether you're riding around the short circuit of Brands Hatch, which takes 50 odd seconds, or around the TT, which takes best part of 20 minutes, or it used to do, the actual pleasure you get from actually being on a bike, being in control, and just doing everything absolutely perfectly. Well, you never actually achieve that, but getting near to that is a fabulous feeling.
Tell me about the early days of going over there and getting used to the TT circuit.
Oh, well, the first time I did the Manx Grand Prix in 1968, and I'd no money. I'd left art college. I was then taking labouring jobs just to feed the motorcycle habit. And I got an old Velocette 500, which was basically a road bike. And I needed to go and look at the TT, because obviously 38 miles round, it needs a bit of learning. And I have the worst memory in the world. I got it from my father, he had a crap memory. So I got to go over a few weeks before and recce the place. I borrowed a Vincent 1000 off a pal of mine, and the big end was rattling, so it wasn't going to go that far. And I took my wife, Carol, with me. And we'd no money. I mean, no money. So the first night, we got sleeping bags, and we slept in Hedge Bottom, going up towards Ballagary. And my missus complained like hell that, she didn't want to do that. And so the second night, we slept on the beach at Ramsey on the Pebbles. It was really comfortable. And the following morning I said, now then, I felt really pleased with myself. Did you enjoy that? She said, I couldn't sleep a wink. She said, I was frightened of the sea coming in and washing us away, but we just didn't have any money. And later on when I was running teams, you get dads coming with the motorhomes, and the kids got little monkey bikes and whatever. And they're saying, just go and watch Mount Jimmy because he's going to be world champion. And I think, well, hang on a minute. That kid's having it so easy that when the time, as you get further up the ladder, it actually does get harder. Once it gets hard, they won't know what's hit them. I think the beauty about people from, I'm sounding like a right old fart now, but people from my era, we didn't have it easy. We didn't have the sponsorship we have now. You got to actually work for it and earn it. And as things get harder, I think you cope with it better.
I would agree. And times have changed, and sometimes not for the better, in terms of when you say, as you rightly say, with some of the younger ones today, they're 6 and 7 years old, they're on Metro Kit bikes, they've got motorhomes with slide outs, and all of a sudden when the going gets tough, and I guess, mate, that's sort of starting later in life at 24. Is it 24, 25?
Whatever.
When you somewhere around there.
I wasn't very old.
When you were at that age.
I was in long pants.
You was in long pants to start. Unlike some nowadays that's still in short pants.
Yeah.
You have a finer appreciation for when things do get tough, when you do have to scrimp and save to go racing and to chase that light that you spoke about.
Yeah.
You have not saying that everybody, but there's sometimes an air of entitlement and expectation these days, which sometimes when the going gets tough, it's like, don't want to do that. Everything's been handed to me so far. Yeah. Why do I have to work for it?
Yeah.
So I think that the highs were higher then as well, because you'd had to work your way through it. Sleeping on the beach with Carol in Hedge Bottoms, all of a sudden when you start getting to stay at the Sefton and places like that, it's like, we've done it. This is what we did it for.
Yeah.
Which gives you a greater appreciation.
I think it does, and and when I started as well, I had a road-going Velocette. It was actually my road bike for going to college on. And I couldn't afford a G50 or a Manx Norton. So I just pulled the lights off it and made a little fancy racing seat for it and went racing that. And although it wasn't really competitive, it actually got me a bit of sponsorship because the bike didn't look quick, and I'm sort of to the top end of a national field, beating people on better bikes. And it was actually better than being on a Manx and Horton or something that was capable of winning and finishing first or second. You got better recognition for it.
It happens a lot, doesn't it? If you look in Grand Prix racing over recent years, Casey Stoner, when he was on the LCR, it was a difficult bike to ride.
Yeah.
But those that knew.
Absolutely.
And that's the important thing.
Yeah.
It's sometimes the fans don't understand everything that go on because there's so much goes on behind the scenes. But those who know could see what you were doing on the machinery you were doing it on.
It's like the schoolboy dad that comes up and says, come and have a look at my Jimmy. When Jimmy's ready for being taken into a team, the people that know will actually go and see the schoolboy dad. Until then, they're doing a good job.
It's right. Sometimes it's better to wait for the teams to come to you. Keep doing your job, keep your head down, keep bringing the results in. People aren't daft. There's eyes everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think they're the ones that go about the business quietly and then you see you've been a team manager, you've been in the same situation. Right. And it does make a difference. But I guess from the Velocet, where did you go from there? How did it progress from there?
Well, from there, there's a lovely fella called Jim Lee, who, for people that will remember, my helmet design would be JL on it. And that was Jim Lee's motive from his business. Jim was a larger than life character. You'd go into a restaurant on a night and he'd laugh louder than anybody, and he was that infectious with his laugh that everybody in the restaurant would laugh with him, you know. And he was a brilliant engineer, and he had a business called Racing Components. He would make petrol tanks, frames. We made a lot of frames for Dalesman. A lovely little story with Jim. There's a guy called Harry Thompson who had Suzuki in Harrogate. And Harry would come in every now and again and have some clip-ons or a fuel tank made. And this particular time, I was actually there, and he came in to see Jim. He said, there's a lovely little fella wanting to buy a bike off me. He says, he's a grand little fella. I can't think of anybody any nicer. He says, but he's got a bit of an affliction. I want you to make me a tank a little bit different so it fits him better. So Jim did it, made the tank. Anyway, 3 or 4 weeks later, Harry came back in again. And Jim said, hey, he said, how did that grand little fella go with the tank I made for you? He said, the rotten little fucking hunchback, he never paid me. Oh dear.
Those were the days.
Oh dear.
That's fantastic to get away with.
But that, and going back to Jim, he came. I used to go to the Battley Motorcycle Club, where the Padgetts were and everyone, which was another part of it. And Jim came to me and just said, I want you to come and work for me. We'll build you a racing bike. And it was just the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. Because until then I was working in a carpet factory in Batley, driving a forklift truck and doing night shifts and horrible stuff. And to actually go and work in a business that were making racing bike bits and giving the bike to ride, I couldn't believe it. And that's where it started from.
Where did you go on from there to take it to the next level?
Right, well, what happened with Jim was that we ran 350 Yamaha, then we had a Gold Star and a Norton Commando, all which we did quite well with. But the problem was we were developing bikes rather than actually racing bikes. And Padgetts were just a few miles down the road and were arch enemies of Jim almost as a business. They offered me a ride, so reluctantly I left Jim and went to Padgetts, and we were riding production bikes, which was a lot easier. And I went from there. We can go into the Padgett thing if you want, whatever. But I got a chance then to ride for John Blair Norton, and it just went on from there really.
Tell me the Padgett story. This is all about you, mate.
Oh crikey! Well, yeah, okay. So Peter Padgett, lovely fella. I have a lot of time for him, but they are quite hard business people. And I remember I went to the TT in maybe 71, 72, and I finished third on the 500 Kawasaki behind Agostini and is it Bergamonte or someone on the 2MV Augustas, and I finished third in the 350 race behind Ago and Tony Rutter. Anyway, we came back, and the following week I had no wage. I said, Peter, where's my wage? He said, "No, lad." He says, "You're on holiday." I said, "No." I said, "I'm working for you." He said, No, you're on holiday." So I said, "Well, you'll pay me, you'll put me stamp on the thing." "No, you're on holiday." So, and the deal at that time was they would provide the bike. I pay for tyres, chains, entry fees, whatever. And we split the money 50-50. Well, between the two third places, I think it was 600 quid. So I actually said to Pete, I said, by this time I'm really getting a bit pissed off with him. So I said, "Look, I owe you 300 quid, is that right?" He said, "Yeah, that's right, so you don't get fucked." And that was the end of it. It was sad really, because don't get me wrong, I mean, as a dynasty, they've been fantastic. But Peter was just pushing too hard. And in actual fact, we sort of came round a bit after that. And at the time, I was leading the 350 and 500 British Championships. And I agreed to do, although I left them, I agreed to do the remaining rounds of the championships. And I finished winning the 351. And the 500, the final round was at Snetterton, the bike Caesars. I didn't win that one. But we were still good friends, and we were friends after that. But in a racing situation, if it had just been a bit easier, life would have been happier.
So it makes it difficult. Racing's difficult enough, without throwing the financial angle in as well.
Yeah.
Because as you said right at the beginning,
Yeah.
when you don't have a lot to start with,
yes,
and then you're not having the return of something that you're expecting,
and the problem
leaves a little sour taste.
And the problem is that I'm not the sharpest knife in the box by any stretch of the imagination, but I knew that your productive time as a racer is quite limited, so you can't have any hold-ups. And I remember we were halfway through the season, and I've been winning the doubles everywhere because the bikes were good, and I was fairly handy. And just before the TT, I got a phone call from Frank Perris, who was the John Player Norton team boss. Would I like to go down and discuss signing a contract? Because what had happened, they got Peter Williams and Phil Reed and poor old Tony Rutter. Well, for whatever reason, Tony couldn't get on with the bike. So they sort of sacked him, and they wanted a third rider in. So they looked at me. So I went into Paget's, really excited one morning with a telegram, as they were then. Peter, I've got a chance of a works ride. And Peter said to me, he said, "If you ride on that," he says, "there's more arse and saddles. You'll have to, you're not must ride my bikes again." Anyway, I went down to Norton and signed a contract. And I was away at that stage. And it's quite interesting. I've always been lucky, thank God. And what actually happened was that I got my contract with Norton. That was 1,200 quid for the second half of the year. There were only 3 bikes. We didn't have any spare bikes. So the deal with Frank Perris was, if one of the bikes broke, they would pinch my bike. But in that condition, I could actually ride my 350 Yamaha.
Okay.
Which had been given to me. It gets a bit confusing now, but John Cooper, who I had a lot to thank for, John said to me, just as I'm leaving Paget's, he just won a big race in Ontario. Well, like a lot of money. They were quite expensive wins at that time. And John had said to me, "I've just bought a 250 and 350 Yamaha, brand new. Take them and pay me when you can afford it." And I've always been brought up, if you can't afford it, you don't do it. So I wasn't keen, but to cut a long story short, I agreed to do it. And so my 350, every time the Norton broke, I could ride my Yamaha, which was actually more competitive than the Norton. Right. And at the end of the the 250 and 350, John had paid £2,200 for the pair of them. which doesn't sound a lot of money. It's a lot of
Not
money then.
lots of money back then.
And at the end of the year, with the John Player £1,200 and my winnings, I went to Coop with a wad of notes like that, £2,200. And really, I never looked back from that. I was up and away then, because I got my own private bikes, and it was a wonderful time because I could go to Brands Hatch, Alton Park. I could do the odd meeting at Grand Prix in Assen or Hockenheim or Monza or where I wanted to go. You just went wherever you wanted, and if you went and did a Grand Prix, if you're the fastest 40 in the world, you got on the grid. It was just amazing. I mean, now it's a closed shop. It wasn't then, and a lot better. A lot better.
The world was at your feet, wasn't it, at that point?
Yeah.
You knew then that this is it. It's not that you'd made it, but this is now where the work begins.
Yeah.
Because we're on the ladder.
That's right.
The light's a little bit brighter.
Yeah.
And this is where we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me about the times going to the Grand Prix and riding across Europe, coming out of the UK for the first time, probably.
We did the race of the year and things in Brands Hatch, and the Grand Prix guys, I could more or less certainly hold my own and beat most of them, because I didn't realise at the time, but racing short circuit in England wasn't like Grand Prix were then. Grand Prix then were all fast circuits. And my first Grand Prix, I went to Hockenheim, and I finished 10th. And I was that disappointed and embarrassed. I never went to pick my start money, my prize money up. I was embarrassed. Looking back, it was a good result.
To be one of the 10 fastest riders in the world.
But I didn't realise at the time that in England you didn't need a quick motorbike. You needed good brakes, and that got you around and got you in a good position. Grand Prix, they were using bits of time I could never seen before. Big flowing racing lines. You got your people. I remember at Hockenheim, Phil Reed, who was my teammate in Norton earlier, who was very friendly with, in fact. He was running a 350 MV Augusta in, and I said, I was struggling in practice. I said, Phil, can I follow you around, please? And he was running this 350 in, not going really quick. And he was using bits of time I could never even thought about using. And it made so much sense. But it was quite a hard learning curve.
How much did you learn from that going forward into the later career? How much of an influence were those times on that?
Absolutely, because you've got to realise there's a different technique, completely different technique. And a lot of the circuits then, the Grand Prix, like Imatra and places, they were almost like, Imatra was just like the Northwest, just fabulous, just rode between trees and wheeling and whatever. I used to really enjoy that. It just completely, and it's just experience, and you're just building on experience. I remember experiences. The first race I ever did was at Croft on my Velocette. And I thought I was going the best thing in the world. And I got lapped halfway through the final by a guy called Robin Fitton on a very fast Manx Norton. And Robin had finished second at the Ulster Grand Prix behind Aggo, so he was a bit of a goer. With experience, 3 years later, I bet Robin on my same Velocette, on the same circuit. And that was just down to experience. And it's just a big learning curve.
Was riding on Imatra and the old Hockenheim circuits, and also the World Championship at the time was still taking in the Isle of Man TT races.
Yes.
Did that kind of lean you towards the road racing like the Northwest 200 in its original guise, and the Isle of Man TT? Was that a contributing factor?
No, through my career, I've always taken steps like going up a staircase. I just take one step at a time. So the fact that the TT was a Grand Prix didn't even occur to me, because it wasn't something I was going to do. I was never going to be good enough to be able to do that. I just did the TT because I wanted to do it.
When did you realise you were good enough to be competitive there?
It took 2 or 3 years. It took, I think, the 3rd or 4th year before I started going good. The first year I went to the Manx Grand Prix at 68 on my Velocette, I actually finished last. I think there were 48 finished in the senior race. I finished 48th. And there was a reason. I think I was even with a chance of maybe winning the newcomers, but I'd made my own contact ignition system. And I said, I'm not the sharpest knife in the box. And my engineering ability at that time wasn't very good. And I didn't do a very good job of it. And on the third lap, coming down to Hilbury, the bike stopped and I had to push from Hilbury to the start. Open the end of the contact thing, get a screwdriver and prise the points apart and set off again. I lost a lap. But all good. And then on Jim Lee's bikes after that, I think finishing 16th and 17th. And then my first win, 70 now then, let me think. 73, 74 on the private Yamaha. I was winning, I was leading the race, and at that stage I realised I was capable of winning. And there's a lovely little story with it. There were the John Player Norton thing. It was, so it must have been, I've got my dates wrong, it must have been 1972.
Works Norton 72.
Yeah. And I hadn't actually got the Norton contract signed by this stage. And there was a guy called Peter Neal. And unfortunately, there's a guy called Jeff Cannell who was commentating in the pub just behind the jump at Balaffa, the bridge. And I've always had this theory, especially more important in those days than now, that you land on the front wheel to save the gearbox and the chain. So I'm doing these front wheel landings, and all through practice, Jeff Cannell's saying, "Oh, Mick's looking dangerous, and it's going to fall off, and it's all." And Carol can hear all this, my wife, and I'm thinking, well, if Frank Purris from Norton can hear this, I'm maybe not going to get my Norton ride. So, in one of the practice sessions, the 125 was on, so I went to see Jeff Cannell, who I'd never met in my life before, and I went upstairs in his pub he's got his commentator thing set up in the bedroom. And I said, "Jeff, I'm Mick Grant, I'm the guy that you're saying doesn't know what he's doing, jumping land." I said, "I'm doing it on purpose." He said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned," because he was quite abrasive, "as far as I'm concerned, it looks dangerous, so I'm going to say it's dangerous." I said, "All right, fine, okay." So the 500 race came by, and the first lap I was in a real rush, and I landed on the front wheel as normal. And apparently Jeff Cannell said, "Oh, he's at it again. He's landed on the front wheel. God, it looks so scary." And then the second lap, I'd got about 30-second lead over Jack Finlay on the Suzuki. And the second lap, I got time to muck about. So instead of holding the brake right to the top of the hill, you let it go early and just touch the throttle and land on the back wheel. And Cannell said, "Oh, at long last, he's got the jump right." So the next lap, and this sounds like a real smart ass, I'm sorry, but the next lap round, I got my lead had increased again. So the third lap round, I went over, I didn't take off, and I just did that to him. And he said, "Oh, he's so happy, he's even waving at me." And unfortunately, Jeff had the last laugh because I fell off the lap later at Rutter had put some oil down at Parliament Square, and there was no flag out for it. And I fell off there, so Jeff got the last laugh. But yeah,
one of the slower places to fall off.
Yeah.
But what a story! You'd be able to have the presence of mind to do that as he's giving you something, giving you the heat as you're going over Balaf.
But I knew what he'd be commentating that, and it was just funny. Yeah,
it's super. What a great story! I can picture that now.
Yeah.
So going on from that time was when you really kicked into gear at the TT, wasn't it? In your first win wasn't far away. Yeah,
the following 74 on Slippery Sam, and I'd broke my wrist at Brands Hatch in the Transatlantic Trophy on a 700 Yamaha. They were awful things to ride. And Les Williams, who by that time actually owned Slippery Sam, we'd done a deal over the phone. And I saw Les on the Monday morning, and I'll never forget his face when he saw that got my right wrist in plaster. Thinking, "Oh, what have I done here? What idiot have I signed up?" And I couldn't bend my wrist, so we're having to do the throttle just by rolling it backwards and forwards. And anyway, we did the 4 laps, and I won the race. It was good.
Why was it called Slippery Sam?
It was called Slippery Sam because a couple of years earlier, Percy Tate and whoever else had been riding it in Barcelona at the 24 at Montjuic Park. And for the full 24 hours, it had an oil leak. And so Percy, being Percy, called it Slippery Sam, and the name stuck with it. But I must admit, when I rode it, we never had an oil leak. But I remember in practice, we hardly finished a lap. It kept breaking cranks and doing all sorts of things. But come the race, it ran absolutely perfectly.
It knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you had the early mornings as well, didn't you? Early morning practice.
Do you know, the most frightening thing in the world, and it would never happen again, but a Le Mans type start.
Really?
Yeah, 50 riders lined up on one side of the Glen Clutcher Road, and the bikes on the other. The guy dropped his flag, and you got 50 riders down Braille within about 3 seconds.
I never knew that.
It was just, scary. I've never, ever wanted a bike to start as quick. I wanted to be in front of that bunch, I'll tell you.
Is that what helped you push starts over the years? Because you needed to get away from that as quick as you could.
But this is a kickstart, the production bike.
Oh, was it? So it wasn't...
Because Slippery Sam, because you didn't have electric starts in those days.
No, we couldn't even bump... No, of course you couldn't bump start it either, could you?
No, so a kickstart. Oh dear.
My days.
Oh, everybody kickstart, but just scary.
Well, you got to hope that it goes first time and then away.
He didn't want to be in the middle of that bunch going down Braille, but somebody had to be.
Somebody had to be. So when I'm going to move this aside because I got my notes and a little bit of history for you here. So from 72, 73 were the early days of the TT, and then 74 was the start of the relationship with Kawasaki.
Yes, 74. The year I won on Slippery Sam, I got the broken wrist, and it was an unofficial 750 ride I had. It wasn't actually with the factory. And again, I got my right wrist in plaster, and it was a wet day, and I finished 17th. I just couldn't ride it because obviously Slippery Sam was quite a soft thing to ride, and I could actually manage to ride it as that. But the Kawasaki was different kettle of fish. And I think I held the plugs, and we came in on the third lap and changed plugs, and I think I finished 17th and got a bronze replica, the only one I ever got. So that wasn't the best of starts with the Kawasaki, but the following year, I'd started a 4-year contract with Kawasaki from 75 to 1978, and that was a lot better.
That's a long-term contract, isn't it, in today's terms?
No, we'd renewed. There were just yearly contracts.
Oh, so it was still a yearly. It wasn't signing a 4-year deal. It was 3 renewals.
Yeah.
And you started with Stan Shenton at the time.
Yes, Stan Boyers of Bromley. That was a motorcycle shop.
That was a dealer that would the boys Kawasaki.
Yeah. And a couple of years before that, I had a mechanic called Nigel Everett, and when I was starting doing my own private Yamahas, Nigel was only 16, and he used to come up from Oxford or somewhere, Whitney, and he'd got L plates on his little 50cc thing, and he'd chuck his L plates in the ditch and ride up the motorway every weekend for us to go racing with. And although he was green as grass and had no real experience, I just thought, well, a kid with that sort of enthusiasm, it's got to be worth keeping on. And in actual fact, I kept Nigel on for the rest of my career.
So he was your wingman for every year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was a man for all seasons.
He was indeed, yeah.
So tell me about 1975, because as I've looked at the records, TT lap record, Northwest, first ever 120 lap. That was sort of the start of I guess stardom for Mick Grant.
Yeah, there's something about Kawasaki, there's something about Green Meanie that just seemed to work, and I just fitted into that nicely. Just an amazing period of time, really. But I remember when we went to the Northwest, and by this stage, we had a little problem within the team, in that Barry Dixon and myself, we were never mates, but we never really had any problem. We were just riders in the same team, the same colour leathers. Stan, the team manager, initially we got on really well, but as the contract went from year to year, the relationship deteriorated. And I think it started because Stan, he saw me as the professional, and Barry was the sort of guy he was bringing on, and he tended to favour Barry quite a bit. Barry didn't like road racing. He didn't like the Isle of Man. He didn't like the Northwest, because at that stage, if Kawasaki did the TT, did the Northwest, these sort of things, it made quite a difference to bike sales, a lot more than it does now. So we got to go to these places. And I remember I used to have a pal in Northern Ireland, a Billy McCosh, car dealer. He'd always provide me with a car when I went over. And I was telling Stan that night in the pub that I'd been coming up from Ballymena and passed a long line of cars and almost put a police car in the ditch coming the opposite direction. And he immediately turned around and followed me and got me down and read the right act to me. What do you think you're doing, or whatever? And he said, why in a rush? I said, I'm trying to get to the Northwest because I'm late for practice. Oh, you're riding now? And then I told him my name. And so he said, all right, we'll have a good practice and crack on, get on with it. So we're in the pub that night, having a meal. And I'm telling this to Shenton and Ditchburn. And whether they believe it or not, it doesn't really matter. So the following day, after practice, we're going round in the car, and I've got Stan in the back and Barry in the front. And because I've done the Northwest 2 or 3 times before, I'm showing Barry the lines. And we're going up Juniper Hill, and without any warning, this black police car, lights on, pulled me over. And I looked in the mirror, and Stan's in the back, and he's looking like, now smart bastard. And this big fat sergeant came up, put the window down, and he said, oh, Mick, he said, do you want to say good luck for the weekend? That's like fucking brilliant. Yeah, right. But up Stan had a shit-eating grin on his face.
Thinking that you were going to be given a ticket.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that any motorcycle had lapped over 120 miles an hour at the Northwest on the old course that went down into Coleraine.
That's right, yeah.
And I can't imagine. I've been over to the Northwest a couple of times, and now you cut across at University on the Link Road, not down into Coleraine.
Well, where the magic roundabout is, that used to be a flat out right-hander.
Oh, as you're coming out. Because you're coming out of Coleraine, and it does, doesn't it? It goes round to the right.
Yeah.
But then after that, at
Mathers Cross.
Is it Mathers Cross, isn't it, the first one? Magraboy is the last chicane.
We
didn't have those?
We didn't have chicanes.
No. But just to work out where you are.
Yeah.
Tell me about Mathers Cross, because you flat out top gear, right-hander.
Yeah.
As you hit the apex,
I think we'll be down.
There's a gable end.
I think we'll be down a gear for that.
Do you go down a gear for it?
I think so. I can't remember quite, but I think we've got.
But as you go through it, there's a gable end of a house right in front of you.
All I would do there, coming out of there, is just be watching my rev counter, and I just wanted a few more revs on to know that I'd come through better. But again, corners like that, from the experience doing the Grand Prix earlier, fast corners, it definitely has a big advantage. As against people who had maybe ridden nationals in England and not ridden anywhere else.
This is what I mean with the crossover of what we spoke about before.
Yes, absolutely.
It makes a difference, especially with the course back then when it was the full 9 miles and no chicanes.
Yeah.
What are your finest memories from then?
Crikey. Let me think. I remember winning one race in the Kawasaki. Not a fine memory, but a memory. And we got so many flies on the visor, I couldn't see a thing. So we'd just done the race, and I knew we didn't have enough fuel in to do another lap. So I got to York Corner, and we came back through the back roads, through the estate, or housing estate thing. And there's a rope across the road, and I never saw it, and it yanked me straight off the back.
Good grief.
But, And I've still got a rope burn on my neck to this day from it.
Good God, that's not what you need. And when we spoke to Roger and Reg over the last couple of episodes that we did with them, the nights out at the Northwest, the track action was fantastic because it was an attritional race.
Yes.
Back then, both for finishing and surviving in some cases because it was a road race. But the thing that I love about that era of racing and into the 80s is how you boys let your hair down.
Yeah. I mean, Roger and I, later on we were teammates in Suzuki, and we had a great friendship. And we used to work hard and we used to play hard. And Roger used to play a bit harder than I did.
Tell me about that. Now, was it the extra pint that you bought him? The very last...
Oh, well, Roger, it was... I feel sorry for Roger because it was so good. In that particular time, he was probably the best rider in Britain. I think he was better than Sheen. And he never really got the next step up the ladder because of it. But I remember the Northwest one particular time, Roger had been drinking, he loves Guinness. He'd been drinking the Guinness lunchtime and evening, all through. And on the morning of the race, I heard that he wasn't so well. And I went up into the bedroom and there's Roger Burnett, his mechanic, and Ian, Roger's brother. And it was a bit like, you've seen the painting of Nelson when he's dying and they're all around him. It was very much like that. And Roger's moaning and groaning. And Barry Simmons, the team manager, is saying, Roger, can I get you some breakfast? And I couldn't just fancy the thought of bacon and eggs and that. And then Barry Simmons is trying to think of an excuse and he's saying, he said, I'm sure that someone's poisoned him. I said, I bought him a pint of that myself last night. Poor old Roger.
One of the favourite stories that he told during our chat when he was sat just right next to where you are now.
Yeah.
And it was a time you were rock stars of the time. And one of your greatest rivals through the 70s was Barry Sheen.
Yes.
And you two couldn't be further apart in terms of character.
That's right.
How did you get on with Barry in those times?
We had a lot of respect for one another. People would say, "Oh, well, we're good friends." We weren't good friends. We've had the odd night out together, but I wouldn't say we were good friends. I enjoyed riding with him. He was a safe guy to ride with. Got so much talent, and Barry would have got a lot further than he has had he not had his dad Franco as his main mechanic. You know, I remember Franco putting discs on that were put on wrong and various bits and bobs. And Franco, like a schoolboy dad, it helped him early in his career, but later on Barry would have been better. And the other thing Barry did, Barry was so convinced of his own ability and whatever, setting bikes up and whatever else, he tended to do it all himself rather than segmenting it and letting other people help him. And I think Barry could have done a bit better than he did, although he did all right.
He didn't do so bad, did he?
That's right.
He did all right in that respect.
Yeah.
The transatlantic trophy. I'm going through my notes here and what we have. So we're into the kind of the mid 70s now. The transatlantic trophy through 76, still carrying on the road racing, and then you get a little bit of a shot at Grand Prix racing. Yeah.
Well, what actually happened in 1975? We did a race in America on the 250 Kawasaki, which brand new bike out, 7-speed gearbox. And it used to vibrate like hell. And I think we raced it was Ontario in America. And I finished third behind De Hamel, my teammate, and Kenny Roberts. And from that point onwards, within the Kawasaki team, Barry had never done Grand Prix. And I was pressing the Japanese, please develop this bike. I mean, it vibrated so bad that the last 2 or 3 laps, it blew the exhaust pipes apart due to the vibration. And then 77, they actually came back with a 250. They altered the firing order and made it completely smooth. It was a lovely motorbike to ride. And again, this is where, I start to be whinging of it. You're asking me questions, I'm whinging about things. But Shenton said at the beginning, at the time, we were running the superbikes, the 750s in England, and I was getting quite good start money. And for some reason, and I went along with it, I must have been a bit stupid. For 77, Shenton said to me, right, we'll increase your contract to cover the start money. So I'll take your start money and I'll increase that. Which I thought, it's just a load off my mind, that's done. And then the next thing, I'd agreed that, and then he said, oh, we've got the 250 Kawasaki's coming. we've got a full team of Japanese mechanics. But what we're going to do is Ditchman will do the first half of the season and you'll do the second half. I said, well, that's crazy because I've done Grand Prix, I've done most of the circuits. Barry hasn't done any. And if the bike's that good, maybe we're losing a chance here. Anyway, he wouldn't budge on it. So I'm at home doing the British meetings. And Barry, I think, until about halfway through the season, I think he'd had won third place. Just because he didn't have the experience of it. And the first meeting I went to was Paul Ricard, and I crashed quite badly. I qualified third, I think. I quite crashed in the last lap, so that didn't work. So the next meeting was Assen, and I said to the MD of Kawasaki at the time, a guy called John Norman, who did not like racing. I said, John, and I wasn't being big-headed, there have been certain times in my career when I've known I've been going to win. It's really a weird feeling. There's no logic to it because it isn't on form. And before I left Slough, where Kawasaki headquarters at the time, I said to John, I'm going to win this weekend. And he said, oh yes, well, we've heard it all before. And went to Assen. I qualified, I think, third quickest, only a fraction of a second off the pole. And I sat in the pub that night it was the Erklands Hotel. I sat there with Nigel, the mechanic, Dave Buck, the Dunlop tyre engineer, and Barry Ditchman. Stan Shenton's with the Japanese having a meal. And we just sat having a drink the night before the race. And Shenton came past and he said to me, he said, oh, I'm just going for a meeting with the Japanese. So, okay, fine. So then a couple of minutes later, Barry went to bed. So we finished our drinks. And Nigel and me were sharing a twin-bedded room. So we're going up to the bedroom, and this sounds stupid, but if Nigel was in, he would actually back me up 100%. We're going along the corridor, and I have my name being mentioned out of this bedroom that Shenton's in. And Shenton's saying to the Japanese, and Mick's dangerous, and Barry's already got third place with 12 points or whatever, so we've got to make sure that Barry gets to the front. And I'm not a violent person, and in fact, I couldn't fight my way out of a paper bag, but I wanted to go and punch him. And I didn't. I went to my room, and I never slept. I was shaking all night. And the following morning, it was quite funny. At that time, I used to get cramp quite badly, even though I was super fit. And at the time, I was taking these big salt tablets that were about the size of a 50p piece. And the Japanese guy, Mr. Yoshida, he saw me take a tablet. He didn't say anything. And then anyway, I got to the start line, and I said to Nigel, I said, because it was push start, I said, are those handlebars tight? He said, why? Because I said, I'm going to bend the fucking things. And the flag dropped, and we had a slick rear and an intermediate front. And I got away first. I remember halfway on the first lap, it was just a few patches of damp. And the thing let go and went completely sideways. And I was that angry. Normally I think, whoops. And all I was thinking, this is costing me time. And I got the lead up to 27 seconds. And then about 3 laps from the end, it started raining. So I thought, well, I'll knock 4 seconds lap off, so I knocked it off. And I came round again, it's still plus 27. I thought, that's strange. Oh, that's okay, I'll knock a little bit more off. Then I came round the last lap, and it's plus P1 plus 7. And I absolutely panicked. Because the trouble is, what people don't realise is you're on a bike, the only information you get, unless you're behind, is what you get on your pit board.
Yeah.
And my pit board suddenly said I lost 20 seconds in the lap, which didn't make sense. But I can only go on with the information I'm getting.
Of course.
So my last lap, how I didn't fall off, I don't know. I had it sideways, I lost the front. By some freak, I stayed on it, came back. And of course, Dunlop were delighted. My mechanic was there. No sign of Shenton. Didn't come anywhere near. Went to the prize giving that night. Both Shenton and Barry gone home. They didn't come anywhere near. And it was just sad because there was no need for it.
No, that's disappointing and disrespectful to you as a rider and your achievements.
It isn't productive. It doesn't matter for me, but for the team, it doesn't work. I mean, the Japanese were delighted because they'd been told by Kawasaki in Japan that they'd got to stay on the Grand Prix scene until they'd won a Grand Prix. Then they could go home. So that they were delighted because they could suddenly go back to their families. And then, of course, I won the next weekend in Sweden. And it was just one of those purple patches where most riders will go through it. There's just a particular time and you can't do anything wrong. If it went into a slide, you know you weren't going to fall off. Just a magic feeling. And then the weekend after that we did Finland, and I finished second. Walter Villa bet me on the Harley Davidson, but I can honestly say that in my belief he was only 350 in the 250 race, because his teammate Franco Uncini came to me after the race and said Walter's riding a 350. So we agreed that Walter didn't get his bike back into park firmly. He said it ran out of fuel on the closing down lap. So I said to Franco, Walter's teammate, he said, right, Bruno, next weekend, we'll jointly put a protest in and get his bike measured. And if he's riding a 250, then we're going to look stupid. If he's riding a 350, he deserves to be caught. It's quite simple. And the other guy in the equation was a guy called Mario Lega, a right good friend of mine, who won the World Championship that year on the Morbidelli. And Mario was also in on it. He thought that Walter was running 350. So the three of us were going to put a joint protest in Brno. So went to Brno the following weekend, and the Kawasaki, I lost the brakes halfway through the race. I was in the leading group. So I went to Uncini afterwards and said, right, Franco, let's get this protest in. And he said, well, no, he said, Mario doesn't want to put a protest in because he's just won the World Championship. So it never happened. And then, of course, that was it. We got the British Grand Prix. There's a complete cock-up there. But that year, I'm not being big-headed, I genuinely thought that year I could have won the World Championship. We never got the chance of it.
But you'll know that because riders, I've spoken to riders over the years, and they talk about that feeling of being in the moment and just the planets aligning and the feel that you have with the motorcycle.
Yeah.
You know more than anybody.
Yeah.
And to people on the outside, it comes across as bravado, it comes across as cockiness.
Yeah.
But nobody knows better than the rider in the saddle.
That's right. I mean, from 1980 to when I packed in 85, I knew I'd reached my sell-by date. And, you know, I was there. I was always in the top few, but I wasn't the guy that I'd been in the 70s. But, you know, that's how it goes, isn't it? But, you know, and it never really bothered me until about 4 years ago. We were at Spa-Francorchamps doing a parade thing. And the organiser said, right, want all the world champions on the grid. And I'm walking on and I was thinking, I'm not a world champion, I can't do it. And it just came home, it doesn't really matter, but it does matter. There was an opportunity there I could have done. Even if I hadn't won it, I could have had a proper crack at it.
Do you look back on those days and appreciate being in the moment of what you were doing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Good, because sometimes I talk to riders and they don't. They only appreciate it after. So I think because of starting a little bit later, having a little bit more maturity and clarity, enables you to go, this is really good. We're doing something here.
Yeah.
This is my career. This is my life.
Yeah.
And the support of your wife and everything that all fitted together for it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really refreshing to understand that you appreciated everything you were doing in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not after you'd hung up the leathers.
Yeah. Because the one of the problems is, you know, riders can be seen as being big-headed. And you get a microphone stuffed under your face when you've just won a race and maybe done a lap record. And the commentator will say, oh, how was that? And you actually say something like, it wasn't difficult and I could have gone quicker. And you're actually all you're doing is you're not being big-headed, you're being honest. The truth is that in actual fact, when it's all working properly for you, it doesn't feel quick. It doesn't feel to be an effort. That's the most efficient. So you get the comment again, how was it? I could have gone quicker. Probably no, you couldn't. Because if you decided to try to go quicker, you'd have actually gone backwards. And it just took me a long while to actually get that into my head, but that's the way it is. But people see that as being big-headed. It isn't. It's just you're being honest,
Did that help you on the roads? By being aware of what you were doing and not pushing and not chasing the lap times?
I don't think I ever sat on the start line without thinking, just be careful, this can be dangerous. I had quite a lot of crashes. But in the people that would worry me, especially in the early days, before you got really professional, were people that were chancers that would think, the people that thought it won't happen to me, they were the dangerous ones. And they were the ones that when they did have a big crash, if they came back at all, it took them a long time. The riders that that fully understood that it's dangerous, you could have a big crash and you could jump back on and you go quick straight away again because you're aware of it. It wasn't a shock to the system.
When you look back at the mid and late 70s through the TT and the Grand Prix times, what are your favourite memories?
The TT, oh crikey.
These are ones where I give you a bit of time to think and...
I don't know. It's just... I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's all been good, really. It's all been good. Some of the funniest stories you couldn't tell. Some of the best stories you couldn't tell.
We haven't even got on to Macau yet.
No. But no.
So tell me what was the decision behind leaving Kawasaki and moving to Honda?
Right. When, towards the end of, to carry on the really whinging saga about why I didn't win a World Championship.
Trying to get away from that for you.
Trying to get whinging about not going to win the World Championship in 77. 78, continued with Kawasaki, doing what I'd asked them to do in the first place, which was doing Grand Prix. And at that stage in 78, that stopped development on the 750 Kawasaki, obviously to work on the 250 and 350 tandem twins. So from a 750 point of view, in the 75, 76, we got a good package with the 750 Kawasaki. But by 77, 78, Suzuki and Yamaha were catching up. In fact, they'd actually passed us. So the 750 Kawasaki for 79 wasn't really competitive anymore. So the Grand Prix was the way to go. They brought Corky Barlington in. And again, I had bother with Stan. I had two contracts that year, one to do the national scene on the 750 and to do the Grand Prix. Nigel, my mechanic, he was staying at home, doing the home meetings, which I didn't want. I wanted him to be at the Grand Prix. And we didn't have a bus full of mechanics like they have now. I had one mechanic. Corky had one mechanic, who was his brother. And Dozy Barlington was a first-class mechanic, a really spot-on bloke. And he worked well with Corky. I had an arsehole of a guy helping me, and it didn't work all year. We just never... He was doing things without telling me on the bike. There were sprockets falling off. It was just a complete mess. Corky won the World Championship that year. I couldn't see things getting any better the following year, so I decided that I'd had enough. I needed new pastures. Incidentally, this mechanic, I did a race at Donington Park on the 250 and 350, and the 250C's going down Craner curves and threw me off with a carburation problem, and the other bike, the gearbox, kept jumping out of gear. And I had a big fallout with the team, and I went to Brands Hatch the following the last meeting, and I won all 4 races. which pissed me off because it was that put the job right too late. Honda came along and said, we've got this most exciting project. It's Honda coming back into 500 Grand Prix. Well, suddenly I'm looking at Halewood 1968, Honda 6s, Honda 4s. What a fabulous thing to be involved in. You couldn't say no to it. And, the money was quite good. So I signed a contract with Honda and regrettably left Kawasaki. But even with hindsight, it was the right thing to do. We were going nowhere with them. And the Honda thing is just, it was an amazing 2 years.
Do you know what I'm going to do at this point? This is the point where we finish part 1, because we're going to have a drink, we're going to have a nature break, and then we'll tell you all about the Honda, and then into Mick's later career, into rider management and trials riding as well, which will probably need another episode on its own for trials riding, because this is where we see the big smile now for how much you're enjoying the pre-65 trials. So join us for part 2. Thanks for watching.